in Norway during this time period, deaths from heart attack and stroke. So let's do this together. Let's look, starting on the left, in 1927, you can see in Norway, deaths from heart attack and stroke were going up. 1930, going up. 1935, going up. 1939, in come the Germans. Whoop, 1940, whoop, 41. Who knew these Germans were these great public health educators? The disease was plummeting, and look what happened. In 1945, with the death of Adolf Hitler and the cessation of hostilities in the European theater, immediately back comes the meat, back comes the dairy, back come the strokes, back come the heart attacks. But sadly, we just did not get it. Now, we're going into a phase where probably the next 3 or 4 slides will be the most important ones that I share with you this evening. On your right, you're seeing an artery that correctly you've diagnosed as being severely diseased. And you're probably saying when that small opening closes off, there'll be a heart attack. Interestingly enough, only about 10% of heart attacks occur with something this severely diseased. Yes, you will have chest pain. Yes, you will have shortness of breath. But this has taken so long to develop that as the downstream heart muscle has been slowly deprived of its due of oxygen and nutrients, the body makes its own little bypass. These little tiny collaterals or threads will begin to grow around the blockage, enough so that they can often sustain the downstream heart muscle viability even when that closes off. So on an angiogram, you'll see 100% blockage of an artery, but still no heart attack. But now let's do this. Let's do this. Let's look at the left. Even those of you in the back, if you look carefully on the inside, you will see a tiny little dark line. That tiny little dark line has a name, the endothelium. And the endothelium manufactures a truly magic molecule of gas called nitric oxide. We're going to talk more about that very shortly because in the meantime, I know you've all been waiting for this. Even though I went to Yale, this is from Peter Libby of Harvard, which is okay. Now, you look up where the blue is. In the blue area up there, that is where the blood is flowing. Just below the blue area, you will see, if you look carefully, these little single layer purple cells separating the flowing blood from the artery wall. Those are the endothelial cells. Now let's go over here and start in the upper left. And you'll notice in the blue there are these orange LDL particles, which are sticky because you had a cheeseburger, a milkshake, hamburger, and pizza. So they're sticky. And they bump up against the sticky endothelium and they find a crack, a fissure, an opening. And now those small, hard, dense LDL particles will migrate through the endothelial wall into the subendothelial space, where, as you can see, Peter Libby from Harvard has taken them from orange to yellow. He's painted them yellow now because they have been oxidized by these free radicals that are often produced by this food we're eating. And the subendothelial space does not like these small, hard, dense yellow LDL particles and will call upon our SWAT team, our white blood cells, which here he has drawn blue in honor of Yale, and we like that. But now you'll notice the blue macrophage is gobbling up like Pac-Man as it goes across from left to right, gobbling up, gobbling up, gobbling up until we get all the way over to the right. When we in medicine do what we do so often, we change the name. It is now called a foam cell. And the foam cell is truly the Darth Vader of this sequence of events. This is the nasty radical because the foam cell begins to elaborate, manufacture these nasty, nasty metalloproteinases. stromelicin, elastase, collagenase, myeloperoxidase. What do they do that's so bad? What they do is they progressively, as you see here on the left, if you look at the cap over the plaque on the left, as you go up to the top of the cap, it gets thinner and thinner and thinner from the action of these metalloproteinases until it becomes so thin that the sheer force of blood tearing over it tears the cap over your plaque. That's the seminal event. You have now ruptured your plaque. So now there is the extravasation of, or if you will, the oozing out of plaque content into the flowing blood, which now activates our clotting factors like platelets. And in the next section, under B, you can see that where the cap ruptured, there is now a clot. And that clot is in and of itself self-propagating. So in a matter of further minutes, now we're all the way over to the right under number C. And sure enough, the clot is totally blocking the artery. No time for collaterals to develop. Suddenly, all the downstream heart muscle is deprived of oxygen and nutrients, and it starts to die, and there's your heart attack. 90% of them. Now, if I do my job correctly tonight, every one of you and your friends or relatives should be able to make yourselves heart attack proof. Fair enough. How are you going to do that? Well, we're not going to do it with another pill or a drug. We're not going to do it with a stent or a bypass or in any operation. We're going to make you heart attack proof by changing your biochemistry. Fair enough. How are you going to change your biochemistry? We're going to change your biochemistry by changing your food. All right? To what? To whole food, plant-based nutrition. When you do that, this entire cascade of events that I have described to you tonight, where the LDL cholesterol gets sticky, where the migration cannot occur, it doesn't get transformed into small, hard, dense particle. There is no SWAT team coming across. There is no foam cell. There are no metalloproteinases. The cap over your plaque, instead of thinning out, will become thicker and stronger. And when you strengthen the cap over your plaque, it cannot rupture. And when you cannot rupture your plaque, you have made yourself heart attack proof. And if we do this right, it ought to take something like 3 weeks. And that's my job tonight to show you how that happens. Now, forget the x-ray. What you're looking at here, the artist has drawn an artery that is half filled with plaque and it is half open. Now, we used to think of, up until 1980, that these little cute red bricks that were lining our pipes, these endothelial cells, we just thought they were like little lining cells. But that all changed in 1980. In 1980, Dr. Furchtgott, working in Brooklyn, was taking the largest blood vessel in the rodent, the aorta, and he would do this sort of elliptical spiral staircase cut on it, right through the endothelium, and then he would immerse it in saline and it would constrict. Well, one day he had no cut on it, no injury to the endothelial cells of this aorta. He immersed it in the saline and it dilated. Did it again, it dilated. Now suddenly, globally, the race was on to find out what was the EDRF that Dr. Furchtgott had discovered, endothelial-derived relaxation factor. So thank heavens that term was with us only 8 years, because at the end of 8 years, Dr. Furchtgott, Dr. Murad, and Dr. Luignaro found that the EDRF was a gas, nitric oxide. And for that discovery, those three men got the Nobel Prize in 1998. All right. Now, what makes nitric oxide so special are its functions. One, nitric oxide will keep all the cellular elements within our bloodstream flowing smoothly like Teflon rather than Velcro. Number two, Nitric oxide is the strongest blood vessel dilator in the body. When you climb stairs, the arteries to your heart, the arteries to your legs, they widen, they dilate. That's nitric oxide. Number 3, nitric oxide will protect the wall of your artery from becoming thickened, stiff, or inflamed, protect you from getting high blood pressure, hypertension. Number 4, nitric oxide. And this is the absolute key. Nitric oxide in a safe amount will protect us all from ever developing any blockages or plaque. On the other hand, anybody who has blockages or plaque, whether they're from London, Berlin, Chicago, New York, or Milwaukee, Wisconsin, if they have blockages and cardiovascular disease, it is because by now in the preceding decades, they have so trashed, injured, compromised, and turned their endothelial system into a train wreck that they no longer have enough nitric oxide to protect themselves from making blockages and plaque. However, the good news here is that this is not a malignancy. This is a completely benign foodborne illness. And once you can get patients never ever again to pass through their lips any morsel that is going to further injure an already train wreck endothelium, then it will begin to recover. Make enough nitric oxide so that really you can halt disease progression, and we often will find significant elements of disease reversal. So, you know, as I look out at this wonderful audience from Milwaukee or Wisconsin, I can see a bunch of you are saying to yourselves, I wonder what my level of nitric oxide is. Well, we don't have an office machine that'll readily do that for patients. However, what's done in the research area is that you take an ultrasound probe, place it over the brachial artery at the elbow, and there on the readout of the screen, you'll see the diameter. Then for 5 minutes, you will encircle the upper arm with a blood pressure cuff that you will then inflate above systolic blood pressure, so that for 5 minutes, you have absolutely zero blood flow to your forearm and hand. Now, I've had that done, and it's not exactly habit forming, but then you release the cuff and immediately remeasure the new diameter of the brachial artery with the ultrasound probe, and in the normal patient, it'll be 30% greater. Now, the next thing that happened is that Dr. Robert Vogel, chairman of cardiology at the University of Maryland, took a group of healthy young subjects to a certain fast food restaurant, which is characterized by arches, which are golden. Half of them got the cornflakes, brachial artery tourniquet test, normal. The other half had the hash browns and sausage. Within 120 minutes, brachial artery tourniquet test, they couldn't dilate it. That single meal of hash browns and sausage had so injured, so compromised their ability to make nitric oxide, they didn't have enough to dilate the artery. However, being young, as they followed them into the late afternoon, early evening, they began to recover. But you and I know that the next morning for breakfast, it's going to be scrambled eggs and bacon. Lunchtime, we'll have white bread with mayonnaise and cold cuts. And supper time, we'll have a baked potato with sour cream, lamb chops, vegetables soaked in butter, ranch dressing on a salad, and then ice cream for dessert. Here in the good old USA, starting at childhood, we absolutely hammer away all day long the destruction of our endothelial cells, and we are surprised why we have this epidemic of cardiovascular disease after 45 to 50. So it's pretty staggering. Now, let me just emphasize that further. Can you, I don't know if you, can you see my head?
Yes. Yeah.
All right. You see my hand?
Yes.
That's the level of your nitric oxide when you were 8 years old. Do you ever hear of anybody at age 8 having a heart attack? No. Now, suddenly, look at where I am now, at my throat. You're 24. Sadly, you get hit by a bus. At autopsy, what do you see? Lots of early coronary artery disease and blockages, but not enough for your cardiac events yet. Now you can't see my hand, but it's down at my navel. Now I get a phone call from a 48-year-old who says, Dr. Esselstyn, you'd be proud of me. 2 weeks ago, I had a heart attack, but I found your book, and I'm now following your program 80%. My reply is, I have absolutely no idea whose program you're following, but that certainly is not ours. But what you have told me two things. One, you've told me that you ate so terribly for 48 years that you destroyed enough of your endothelial cells. You did not have enough nitric oxide to protect yourselves from having a heart attack. Second thing you've told me is that now 20% of the time, you are still trying to further destroy your few remaining endothelial cells so you can have a second heart attack. That absolutely makes no sense. Now, you'll see 4 what I call defense factors. These are defense factors, the endothelial cell and the 3 others. We only have time tonight to talk about the endothelial cell, but let me reassure you that all 3 of these defense mechanisms are absolutely going to be optimized when you are eating whole food, plant-based nutrition. All right, enough of the background. Let's put it to the test. This is the first study. It was a small study because this was 1985 when we got started. And it was a small study because I still had all my surgical obligations. And we had nothing against women. You'll see in our subsequent study, we had many more women. But the key here is that these people were all sick with triple vessel coronary artery disease. And I wanted every one of them to avoid anything that was going to injure their endothelium. And here are the foods that injure the endothelium whenever you consume them. Any drop of oil, olive oil, corn oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, coconut oil, palm oil, oil in a cracker, oil in a piece of bread, oil in a salad dressing. Oil injures endothelial cells, as does anything with a mother or face. Meat, fish, chicken, fowl, turkey, and eggs. And also anything that is dairy, milk, cream, butter, cheese, ice cream, and yogurt. I don't like nuts and avocado and peanut butter or coffee with caffeine. Now, for those of you who are concerned that what I've said, this happens to be one of multiple peer-reviewed articles on oil showing how olive, soybean, and palm oil intake have a similar acute detrimental effect over the endothelial function in healthy young subjects. Earlier this year, I wrote a paper for the International Journal of Disease Prevention and Reversal. The title of it was, Is Oil Healthy? And I review all the animal and human studies showing how injurious it is to the endothelial cells. Now, this is interesting. This will be helpful to you if you get into a discussion with somebody who's pushing Atkins and paleo and ketogenic diets. This is the work of Stan Hazen and his team from the Cleveland Clinic, who were looking at the molecules of lecithin and carnitine that are contained in these animal foods that omnivores eat. And what Stan did was he gave these omnivores a lamb chop and then measured their blood for TMA, trimethylamine, because persons who are omnivores contain in the microbiome, they contain these products. They contain in their microbiome bacteria that will metabolize lecithin and carnitine into TMA, trimethylamine, which is rapidly oxidized by your liver to trimethylamine oxide. And it is trimethylamine oxide that further injures your blood vessel. And here's the mechanism. The lecithin and carnitine metabolized by gut bacteria. Now we have trimethylamine oxide, which injures the blood vessels. But what Stan found was that if he took somebody who was totally plant-based and fed them a lamb chop, measured their blood for TMAO, it was not there. Why? Because persons who are totally plant-based do not possess in their microbiome bacteria capable of converting lecithin and carnitine to TMAO. Pretty exciting. So what are these folks going to eat? They're going to eat all these marvelous whole grains for their cereal, bread, pasta, rolls, and bagels. 101 different types of legumes, lentils, and beans. All these marvelous vegetables like red, yellow, and green, and sweet potatoes, white potatoes, and some fruit. Now, there's one little wrinkle that we've added in the last 8 years that we think is terribly, terribly important. And that is the following. If I can get a patient that we initially see to imagine shrinking their head to a size that they could actually crawl inside the coronary artery and look at the blockage, they would see that the blockage is an absolute cauldron of oxidative inflammation. So we need antioxidants, but no, do not go down to the health food store and buy a jug of pills that says antioxidant, because it doesn't work and it's going to be harmful. Therefore, I need you to get your antioxidants from food. Fair enough. What food? Food that is high in what we call ORAC value, O-R-A-C, oxygen radical absorptive capacity. So this means that if you're having raspberries, blueberries, strawberries, blackberries on your morning oat cereal, that is a terrific start. However, nothing can trump the antioxidant value of green leafy vegetables. So I need you to chew 6 times a day. Chew, not smoothies or juicing. I need you to chew a green leafy vegetable 6 times a day after, roughly the size of, let's say, 3/4 the size of your fist, after it has first been boiled in water 5.5 to 6 minutes, so it's nice and tender, or steamed. Then you must then anoint it with several drops of a delightful balsamic vinegar. Why? Because the acetic acid in the vinegar has been shown to restore the nitric oxide synthase enzyme contained within the endothelial cell that is responsible for making nitric oxide. So you're going to chew these vegetables alongside your breakfast cereal, again as a mid-morning snack, again with your lunch and sandwich, that's 3, mid-afternoon 4, dinner time 5, and of course I adore it when you have that evening snack of kale. What are you doing? All day long, you are basking and bathing that horrible oxidative cauldron of inflammation with nature's most powerful antioxidant. Now, all right, the second thing that chewing the greens does, chewing the greens also restores the capacity of your bone marrow to make more endothelial progenitor cells, which will replace your senescent, injured, worn out endothelial cells. And the third thing that chewing the greens does, when you are chewing a green, you are chewing a nitrate. As you chew the nitrate, it is going to mix with the facultative anaerobic bacteria that reside in the crypts and grooves of your tongue. Now, also, those bacteria mixing with your nitrate that you're chewing are going to reduce it to a nitrite in your mouth. When you swallow the nitrite, it is further reduced by your gastric acid to more nitric oxide. So here you are. You have heart disease because you have nitric oxide deficiency. You've destroyed so many of your endothelial cells. But when you're chewing these greens, all day long, you are processing the production of the very molecule that you're so deficient in, nitric oxide, without any hideous expense or side effect. Pretty exciting stuff. Now you're wondering, what are the greens that he's talking about? The greens are bok choy, Swiss chard, kale, collards, collard green, beet greens, mustard greens, turnip greens, Napa cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, cilantro, parsley, spinach, and arugula and asparagus. And the top 5 are kale, Swiss chard, spinach, arugula, and beet greens. And look what it does for your memory. No oil. No oil. All right. Now, I want to show you a few angiograms of disease reversal. These happen to be reviewed in the Cleveland Clinic Angiography Core Laboratory by senior technicians that do this all day long for national medical trials, so I know it's accurate. This happens to be a 67-year-old retired pediatrician. You're looking at the left anterior descending coronary artery. The arrow from the left to the arrow on the right is a 10% widening, as small as your naked eye can see. On the other hand, a little easier to see in this 58-year-old factory worker. You're looking at the circumflex artery, and it was described as a 20% improvement from the left arrow to the right arrow. This next is a 54-year-old security guard. This is the right coronary artery. And you're looking at an improvement from the left to the right of 30%. Now this happens to be Joe Crow. And in 1996, at age 44, Joe began to get chest pain. He was not hypertensive. He was not diabetic. He was not a smoker. He had no family history. He exercised regularly. His cholesterol was 156. Chest pain. Our cardiology worked him up. They could find nothing. So a month later, he sat down to do his post-op orders for a patient he just operated on. And suddenly the elephant was sitting on his chest. He had this pain in his left jaw, shoulder, arm. Joe was having a heart attack. He was whipped down to the cath lab. They start the catheterization, cardiac arrest, resuscitate, finish the catheterization, one more cardiac arrest, and they resuscitate. Then he's sent up to the floors and stabilized and then discharged 3 days later. But he's very depressed. And he's depressed because at the time of his angiogram, his entire lower 1/3 of his left anterior descending was all moth-eaten and diseased, as you can see here by the yellow bracket. And that was over too long a segment. You just can't ram in stent after stent after stent. And it was too far down the artery for a bypass. So he was very depressed that they didn't think they could do anything for him. So Ann and I had Joe and his wife out for supper 2 weeks after his heart attack. Joe, come on. You've been eating this horrible Western diet. You got the typical Western disease. Well, why don't you think about going plant-based? We got 10 years of data. I said, okay, yes, I'm going to give it a shot, but I'm not going to take any of the statin drugs. I hear there are too many side effects. Fine, no problem. That's your call. He became the absolute personification of commitment to whole food plant-based nutrition. And over the next 2.5 years, his total cholesterol plummeted. His LDL went from 98 to 38. Then he had another angiogram. And up in the surgical office areas, our doors are about 3 doors apart. So at noontime, on the day that I knew Joe had had his follow-up angiogram, I walked over and let myself into his office, and there he was, sitting behind his desk. And I said, Joe, I understand you had the old follow-up angiogram earlier this morning. Mind sharing with me? How did it go? So he got up from his desk, came around, put his arms around me. A couple of these things occurred under his glasses. And then he said, I think we may be doing okay. And I said, well, would there be any chance that I could possibly see the angiogram? He said, yeah. Now, I have no idea whether my face and my picture are blocking that artery. And if they are, I apologize, but they are on my screen. But anyway, so this was actually complete reversal. But this isn't going to happen to everybody. The key here is this. The key here is to actually understand that really, if you have somebody in if the plaque is young and made up of fat, cholesterol, and inflammation, if the plaque is young, you can get a profound reversal. On the other hand, for those patients where the plaque is old and made up of scar, fibrosis, and calcification, it's going to be very stiff and it's going to be hard. But the interesting thing is that even those patients can get back to full activity of daily living without restriction. And it's going to be my responsibility this evening to show you how that happens. Now, of the 18 patients who stayed with us through that initial study for all of 12 years, I wanted to know how many cardiac events of worsening disease they had had in the 8 years prior to coming into our study, while they were in the hands of expert cardiologists, and they had these 49 events scattered on the categories that you see listed here. However, once those patients came into our study, 17 of those 18 had no further events, but we did have, at 6 years, we had one little sheep who wandered from the flock, got into the French fries, lamb chops, glazed donuts, had more of a recurrence of angina, a bypass, but now he's back with the flock. That proves the point that I'm sharing with you today. Now, we took quite a hit on this. Everybody was saying, you know, Dr. Esselstyn, your diet is really pretty radical and extreme. And my question is, wait a minute. It's exactly the same, or very close to being the same diet that we see in half the planet Earth where the disease is non-existent. But nevertheless, your diet is extreme and radical. And what makes you think that you can do it with a larger group and get the same results? So we did. And this was in 2014 in the Journal of Family Practice that we published this. And the thing that is very challenging to most physicians when they first start trying this is they cannot seem to get the degree of patient adherence or compliance that they would like to see happen. And as you can see here, on the second line down, our adherence was 89.3, almost 90%. Why does that happen? Yeah. So it's gonna, I think the reason we have success is because we show the patient respect. And by that I mean today, when I conduct, once a month, I conduct an intensive counseling seminar, usually for no more than 12 or 14 patients, always with their significant other or spouse who is in attendance. This is a 6-hour seminar. They're going to learn all about how they have created this disease and precisely how we are going to empower them as the locus of control to halt and reverse their disease. And the other thing that I think is so important to get adherence, 2 weeks before the seminar, my secretary will give me a list of who is coming and with their phone number. And I personally call every one of these patients to get my arms around their story. And at the same time, provide them an opportunity to ask questions of me, so that coming to the seminar, we have a strong platform from which we can all move forward. And as you can see, how many recurrent events and those who were adherent. We had one patient who, when he was visiting China, absolutely went berserkers, was eating off the economy, all that salt. He had a tendency to have hypertension. He had a small cerebellar stroke from which he recovered. The non-adherent actually had a 62% rate of recurring events. And what you're seeing here, you're going to have, somebody there is going to have to tell me, is my picture blocking this slide?
No, it is not. No, it is not. We see the entire slide.
Okay. If you look at the ordinate on the left, major cardiac events, stroke, heart attack, and death. And then if we go across to the far right, you're looking first, well, I wanted to compare our results with these well-known cardiovascular studies. That's the Lyon Diet Heart Study from Mediterranean on the far right, and at 4 years, 25% had heart attack, stroke, and death. The next one, the Natural History of Coronary Artery Disease, that's the Columbia Presbyterian Hospital in New York City. That was something of the order of 20%. And then Bill Bowden's Courage study, 19%. So here we are on the left, 0.6%. That's over a 30-fold difference. What is going on here? Why is there such a difference? And the reason is that we are asking the patients to treat the causation of their illness. There's been a basic covenant of trust between the caregiver and the patient since the days of Hippocrates, that whenever possible, the caregiver will share with the patient what is the causation of the illness. And sadly today, in cardiovascular medicine, that is not being done. However, I'm proud to say that 4 years ago, I was invited by the American College of Cardiology to join their nutrition committee. And what we are trying to do is everything we can to try to educate cardiologists about the causation of the illness that they've been asked to treat. All right, now on the left, you are seeing a pulse volume at the ankle of a gentleman who had a partially blocked artery in his thigh, and he had to stop 5 times crossing the skyway to my office because of this claudication in his right calf. But I was so focused on his heart, I totally forgot about his leg. And 11 months later, he said to me, Dr. Esselstyn, do you recall when I first started seeing you, I had to stop 5 times crossing the skyway to your office? Yeah. He said, you know, the last month it got to be 3 times, then 2, then 1. He said, I don't stop anymore. The pain is gone. Don, back you go to the vascular lab. And now if you look on your right, you will see that the pulse volume is absolutely double what it was. This was absolutely so exciting for us because it was the first time in this early study that we now had absolutely rock solid, irrefutable scientific data that food and food alone could absolutely reverse cardiovascular disease. And you're probably going to say, well, wait a minute. What about the statin drug? Well, wait a minute. This is the second patient that I've told you about today. No statin. See, the 1986, we didn't have any statin drugs then. So for the poor patients who come in so worried about the fact that they can't take a statin because of the serious side effects, they are in no way precluded from enjoying similar results if they behave this way. Here, on the other hand, this happens to be a retired 78-year-old high school chemistry teacher. In his retirement, he and his wife loved to enter these square dance contests. It was during the fast square dance that he was getting bilateral calf pain and claudication because of this circulatory problem that you see here on the right. So he saw these vascular surgeons who got these images. He didn't like the big operation they proposed, came to see us and said, Dr. Esselstyn, if I choose your method, how long will it take me to get rid of my bilateral calf pain? So I looked at him with great wisdom in my face. And I said, probably 10 or 11 months. 3 months later, I got a phone call. Dr. Esselstyn, you do not speak the truth. The pain is gone. So now, I don't know where you folks in Wisconsin have the same sort of TV that we have here in Cleveland. But when you're watching a mystery, or if you're watching a sporting event, just before the advertisement comes on, you will hear the mellifluous tones of the announcer say something like, when the moment is right, will you be ready? Now, we all know that the penile artery is really quite tiny compared to the coronary artery. So not infrequently, before somebody comes down with heart disease, they may find they're no longer able to raise the flag. However, all is not lost, because not infrequently, 10 or 11 months after I've counseled somebody, I'll get a phone call. Dr. Esselstyn, yep, this is Mr. So-and-so. Fair enough. Yeah, I said, I really thought I ought to give you a call because recently something has come up. And I'm wondering if I don't owe you another check. Now, what I promised you tonight, that we talk about how do these people get back to daily living when they've got an old plaque that is not going to go away. Here you have on your left, that is a PET rubidium dipyridamole scan. That's a PET scan. If it is orange or yellow, that's good. But where it's green, that is poor. That is a 60-year-old stockbroker from downtown Cleveland with a cholesterol of 248. And at the time that he had that PET scan on the left is when I counseled him. 10 days later, his cholesterol was down to 137 milligrams per deciliter. Then 3 weeks later, we repeated the PET scan, and it's back. Now, how does that happen? Nobody washes out a plaque in 3 weeks. I don't care what it's made of. Doesn't happen. So bear with me. Here you're looking at the heart with all the muscle gone. And you can see those 3 major vessels that are epicardial, the right coronary artery, the LAD, and the circumflex. Where do they go? They all go diving into the heart muscle. And you can see all those cascade of interconnecting thousands and thousands of intramuscular arteries. I called Rodriguez, the Cleveland Clinic cardiovascular pathologist, and said, Rod, how often do you ever see good old garden variety coronary artery disease and plaque once the artery has dived into the muscle? His answer, never. Once in a very great while in a severe diabetic. Other than that, never. Now I think I had the answer. Because when you see these patients initially, their endothelial cells are absolutely so beaten down, they have become your enemy. Not only are they no longer able to make sufficient nitric oxide, but they are now making 2 molecules that are your enemy, thromboxane and endothelin. And what do thromboxane and endothelin do? They absolutely are vasoconstrictors. They constrict the vessel. So what happens is when these vessels and all of their endothelium no longer is being injured by the food, then immediately it begins to restore its health. Nitric oxide increases and the endothelial cells stop making any more vasoconstrictors of thromboxane or endothelin. And you literally open up this enormous, mammoth intramuscular cascade of vessels. And if you recall in physics, Poiseuille's law of flow through the hollow viscous is related to the force power of the radius. Translation, a tiny increase in diameter, an enormous increase in flow. And that's how I think this occurs, because it's so dramatic, especially if you follow somebody with stable angina and who suddenly does this and does it right and does all the green leafy vegetables, you can literally see in 4 to 6 or 7 days, they can now walk 3 or 4 blocks before they get any chest pressure, whereas it used to happen at 1.5 to 2 blocks. Or that little hill that they used to walk up and gave them angina, now they can walk up it without discomfort. It's so powerful. And you've absolutely got them hooked because they know how powerful it is now that they are treating the causation of the illness. This is a summary of 8 measures of cardiovascular disease reversal. We've talked about, I've shown you the coronary angiograms. The same thing happens with the stress test. I've shown you the PET scan. We talked about carotid ultrasound reversing, pulse find we've talked about, and the 3 symptoms of angina, claudication, and erectile dysfunction. Now, I always like to wrap up by letting you know what for 31 years on the 8th floor of this hospital, I used to practice surgery, but I like to show it to Milwaukee so they'll know what the trees look like in Cleveland in February. But and now that I've actually retired from surgery and I work at the Wellness Institute, the budget is more modest, but the morale is quite high. And one thing I've learned in 58 years from medical school, yes, brains are important, but nothing is as important as persistence. Best exemplified by this young damsel, Life magazine, trying to learn how to do the splits, 1939. But it's tough to learn how to do the splits, but she stuck with it and stuck with it and stuck with it. And sure enough, the other day, downtown Milwaukee, there was Terry, and he spotted her, and she got it right. So, in summary, can you still hear me?
Yes, we can.
In summary, I'd like to say, first of all, thank you for this opportunity. And I'm happy to entertain some questions. But first, let me finally say that I guess the reason that I hang in there, because and why I'm more passionate now than ever about medicine, is because I really see on the horizon what can truly be a seismic revolution in health. And this seismic revolution in health is never going to come about with the invention of another pill, procedure, or operation. The seismic revolution in health will come about when we in the profession have the will and the grit and the determination to share with the public what is the lifestyle, and most specifically, what is the nutritional literacy that will empower them to absolutely annihilate chronic illness. Thank you. I think I've gone over times. My father always used to say, be sure you leave when you're most welcome. So if there are no questions.
Well, I think we'll probably have a few questions, but it is 7:30, so we're going to have to limit them to probably 2 or 3. Dr. Esselstyn, can you hit the stop share up in the upper part of your screen? Should be a red, something red that says stop share or something like that.
And what do I do with it?
Just click on it. If you can get your cursor up there. There you go. Now we got it. Oh, that's close. Question? We have one over here, and I may have to repeat it, but go ahead.
You were saying, Doctor, you were saying that you don't use any oils and you don't eat nuts at all.
Could you hear that?
Nope, can't hear it.
Okay, so the question was, and correct me if I'm wrong, that you say that you don't eat any oils or any nuts, and you were going to say.
So how does he get his fatty acids?
So how do you get your fatty acids?
Well, how many times have you in Milwaukee heard of anybody who went to the emergency room and said, my God, help me out, I'm short on fatty acids? That's not going to happen, but I think your concern is about whether you're going to have nutritional deficiencies. And I just don't think that that's going to actually be a problem. I have no data that any of our patients have had a fatty acid deficiency. As a matter of fact, it was interesting. The late Bill Connor, when he was studied the Tarahumara Indians in northern Mexico, who eat the 3 sisters, beans, corn, and squash. Okay? And he studied them, and none were obese, none had hypertension, and there were no nutritional deficiencies. I don't think you're going to have a fatty acid deficiency when you're eating robustly the whole grains, the legumes, lentils, and beans, all that range of wonderful red, yellow, and green leafy vegetables. And I should have mentioned, I didn't tell you what the green leafy vegetables are I want you to consider having. They are, ready? Bok choy, Swiss chard, kale, collards, collard green, beet greens, mustard green, turnip greens, Napa cabbage, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cauliflower, cilantro, parsley, spinach, and arugula, and asparagus. And the top 5 are kale, Swiss chard, spinach, arugula, and beet greens. And look what it does for your memory.
Right.
Yeah.
Another question.
Yeah, I'd like to know, when you talk about eating the greens, 2 questions. One, do you need to do that 5 times a day or 6 times if you don't have heart problems? And number 2, can you eat those greens raw?
2 parts to this question. It's when you were talking about eating greens and eating the 5 or 6 times a day, do you need to be doing it that often? If you don't have a heart problem, that's part 1.
No, you don't. You can just 2 or 3 times a day is fine.
Can they be raw?
And number two, can they be raw?
Well, I've looked into that, and I really prefer they be cooked because I mean, how are you going to eat? Really, some of these. I mean, eating mustard greens raw. I don't know. I've not only does it taste better, but I think there is data to show that when you cook them, you actually break down these cell membranes. So when you start chewing something that has already been cooked, you get much more of the available phytonutrients.
On this side?
How about flax, chia, and quinoa?
They're great.
Because there's a lot of polyunsaturated oil in flaxseed, and
It's all right. If you're just having a tablespoon or so on your cereal, that's great.
Here, I just want, Dr. Esselstyn, it's Judith Kubish. I just want to say hello because you got me started 11 years ago.
Whoa.
Judith Kubish is saying thank you because you got her started 11 years ago.
Huh. Well, thank you, Judith.
I came out to see you.
Oh, she came out to see you.
Good.
Okay, question.
Nice to see you again.
Yes, we've got a question over here. And then we'll go back there. And what? Sugar, insulin, and heart. Sugar, as far as its effect on insulin and heart disease. Yeah. Dr. Esselstyn, can you comment on sugar and its effect on insulin and heart disease?
You know, I don't like sugar can injure the endothelial cell production of nitric oxide. And that's the reason I really don't like it. It's another reason why I don't like smoothies. Because if people mix up their greens in the smoothie, it's so tart, they decide to throw in an apple or an orange or a banana. Now, if you eat an apple or an orange, that's fine. That's safe because all the glucose is bound to fiber and the absorption is very safe and slow. When you put the apple and the orange and the banana in the smoothie and grind it up, now you've separated the fructose from the fiber. And this sugar goes off like a rocket in your stomach. And that's when it injures the liver glycase proteins and injures the endothelial cell.
Great. Okay. Sure.
Terry Hope and Warren Bergman say hello.
Terry Hope and Warren Bergman say hello. And they've met you a few years ago.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let me look on this side here. Nobody on this side? Okay, we'll stick on this side. Go ahead.
I just was wondering if you knew Dr. Max Gerson, because I've been doing a diet therapy under him, and your diet is similar to his, and I just want to thank you because you are a wealth of knowledge, and I just enjoy your teaching.
Did you hear that, doctor, or should I repeat?
Can't hear it.
Okay. She was mentioning that she was talking about Dr. Max Gerson, and that she follows Dr. Max Gerson's recommendations, and that it's very similar to yours, and appreciates the wealth of knowledge that you have. And have you heard of Dr. Gerson?
Yes.
Any further thoughts, or would you rather not?
Further thoughts from me?
About Dr. Gerson, or would you rather?
I've never met him. I think he died long before I got involved with this. But I think he has. I guess what I would love to have seen and met him. I would have loved to have seen him or his team. I'd love to see them report what their results would have been in a group of patients seriously ill with cardiovascular disease.
Sure.
I think that's what I felt. I sort of missed, but I think everybody who's seen what he did thought very highly of him. I'm sorry I missed him.
We have two or three more questions.
Feeling the Gerson way with 50 with all the patients that have healed cancer and many other diseases. And
Sure. Great.
Any suggestions
What-
for
Yeah, we'll be.
suggestions or keys to compliance for people who aren't having Western? How do you say to our family and friends so that they not
Could you repeat that one time, or do you want to come up and? Sure.
Can you see me?
Yeah, well, he can't see it, but he'll be able to hear you. And I think this is Dr. Jacobson,
That's
right?
right, yeah.
The urologist here. And
Dr. Esselstyn, hi, Ken Jacobson. I'm a urologist here. Any keys to, hi, any pleasure to meet you. Thank you for all of your wisdom, by the way. Any keys to compliance for patients who aren't suffering from the ills of Western disease, or family members, suggestions that people should make so that people can adopt this and stick with it for a long time when they aren't already feeling bad?
Well, I would welcome any physician who wants to come and attend as my guest is more than welcome to come to our seminar that I conduct once a month. Now, your question was what to do about the patients who are right now feeling well and appear to have all, let's say, optimal risk factors, okay? Now, and I've really just been coming around to this in the last 2 or 3 years. I really haven't commented that much on it, but I think it really is something that has to be considered, which you have pointed out. When I'm speaking to a group of persons, and there are going to be some in that audience who have heart disease who are attentive, and then there are others who are just being sort of supportive of them. But if you really get a room full of 500 patients who are persons who are well, what you really are, in all honesty, looking at are those who are going to be the next who are sick. Because one of the greatest risk factors we all have is aging. And there's a remarkable study of 905,000 person years of follow-up. And they looked particularly at the men and women who were age 55. And they had, at that age, all absolutely optimal risk factors. They followed them for 30 years. At the end of 30 years, 30% of the women and 40% of the men now had cardiovascular disease. In other words, the Western diet is going to get you sooner or later. It may get you with cardiovascular disease. If not, it'll be hypertension, it'll be diabetes, it'll be a stroke, it'll be a heart attack, it'll be vascular dementia. It may be Crohn's disease, ulcerative colitis, rheumatoid arthritis, lupus, multiple sclerosis, allergies, and asthma. We have never, ever before in our toolbox had a weapon that was so absolutely powerful. It was safe, without side effects, and without additional expense, and we can get rid of chronic illness. And therefore, I really think you hit the jackpot. You've got to somehow convince these people that it's probably appropriate for them to start behaving this way. So all those factors that are so important, most important of all, plant-based foods, adequate sleep, socialization, exercise, and you really give yourself an optimal chance to age with grace and with all your faculties and with all your limbs working. So I thank you for that question, and I think it's right spot on, because, and the thing that'll do it to help these patients usher them along is if you give them the education. If they know, and if you can, I spend an hour on this, the endothelial cells and endothelium and nitric oxide at the seminar, because these patients, and I've got to know how it is that they injure their artery. And so even those of you in the audience tonight who are not sick, everyone who's over 17 know from what I've told you that you already have got plaque in your arteries, and you don't want it in your arteries, you don't want it in your brain. So the opportunity is there for you actually to be empowered to absolutely, as I said, to annihilate the possibility of chronic illness.
Two more questions.
I noticed You said nothing, unless I missed it, about wine or other beverages, alcohol.
She asking about wine, other beverages, alcohol.
Well, we know that alcohol is a toxin. It's toxic to your brain, it's toxic to your heart, it's toxic to your liver. And for women, alcohol is a significant breast cancer risk factor. So, you know, if you're going to have a glass of wine on Friday night or Saturday night, I think that's fine. But if you're going to say, I got to have 3 glasses of wine every night to relax, you better talk to me.
We've got one more.
Hi, Dr. Esselstyn. You mentioned how when you were going through the list of foods, how this diet affects your brain health. I want you to speak a little bit more on that regarding Alzheimer's, dementia, those types of things. Has there been any research to correlate having this kind of diet with your risk?
Were you able to hear that, or should I?
No.
Okay. The question was that how you did talk a little bit about how this might help with brain health. Could you go a little bit more, or speak a little bit more about that?
Well,
Dementia, Alzheimer's.
Yeah, I think it's the mild cognitive impairment. I think even the students of Alzheimer's at this point are in agreement that you really are not going to reverse somebody who's got established Alzheimer's disease. But there seems to be a possibility that in its very earliest stage, which is called mild cognitive impairment, you may well be able to do something if you can do the critical things that the doctors Shirzai, that's Aisha and Dean Shirzai are the experts on this. They've written the book on this, and they are out at Loma Linda. And the importance, at the time that you suddenly see mild cognitive impairment occurring, aggressively go 1, plant-based, exercise, plenty of sleep, socialization, and focus. Have focus. Those are just some thoughts. I'm not sure whether that helps or not, but Shirzai is, I think it's Sherzai. Yeah.
And actually, for everybody here, their book is on the table back here. And we hope to get them to speak in the future.
Oh, yeah. They will.
I guess we have one more question, Sarah.
Doctor, thanks so much. What are the problems with coffee and caffeine?
That's taken from an Italian study. Healthy young subjects, divide them in half. Half drinks coffee with caffeine, half drinks decaf. Then they do the brachial returnica test. Then they switch groups. The group that formerly had coffee with decaf is now coffee with caffeine. It was always a group having coffee with caffeine that showed endothelial injury and dysfunction.
Wow.
Thank you. I got to go.
Yep. Well, thank you, Doctor. Thank you.